Starting with our common ancestor, modification must have taken place for us to end up with different types of the same species. Within the human species, I repeat, within the human species, an obvious evolution has occurred. An impartial observer is therefore obliged to recognize the happening of such events. Throughout the course of time, there have been modifications of the human form, but in no way does this signify that we descend from apes, as the adepts of Darwin's have claimed. From the Bible, I have retained as perfectly valid the idea of creation which is emphasized in its text. Nevertheless, as to the present value of the integrality of its narrative of the events, something entirely different is considered. The longest biblical narrative of the creation, in fact there are two of them in the Bible, describes, as I have shown in my book, The Bible, the Quran and Science, the creation by God describe as the creation by God of the animals by presenting the various species are fixed through the ages. Moreover, the chronological data of the Bible lead to evaluate the age of creation of the world and the appearance of man on earth at about 57 to 58 centuries ago. In 1987, now, the Hebrew calendar places them at 5,747 years ago. None of these statements is scientifically acceptable. However, one readily conceives that for the Bible it could not have been otherwise. When dealing with such subject, the biblical authors of this narrative, the first one at the 9th or 10th century before Christ, are recognized by the Christian exegetes themselves as indeed inspired by God, as far as the truth of the faith are concerned, but having written following the ideas, tradition, superstition, or myth of their age about other subjects. How in this circumstance can they have not committed errors concerning facts on which no scientific light was shed prior to the modern era? It is not therefore astonishing that the Second Vatican Council, 1962-1965, declared that the book of the Old Testament might, I quote this declaration of the Second Vatican Council, might, I quote, contain material which is imperfect and obsolete, unquote. The concept of creation of man is often discussed by those who emphasize the resemblances between man and the apes or other supposed ancestors from the points of anatomy and various functions. By this way they suggest that we might be their descendants. They forget that these similarities were imposed on man, who of necessity was obliged to live in the same surroundings. We take the word in its broadest sense, which means our earthly environment with its geographical variations. Thus man needed a respiratory tract similar to what constitutes the latter in other animals which consume oxygen in the air, or a digestive tract to ensure its nutrition from the food provided by the gland or the flesh of other animals, on which man depends, just like animals are depending on others. These essentials of life lead to similarities in functions, physiology, biology, and a host of common characteristics. Without these morphological and functional resemblances, man could not have survived on Earth. Taking into consideration today's firmly established data of science, we cannot find a disagreement between them and the religious teachings about the creation of man, this concept being shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Islam has brought additional teachings concerning man in the Quran.